Clayman Media. You're listening to the We Bear Witness podcast, where we discuss theological truths and cultural influences. Follow us on Spotify or wherever podcasts are streaming. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the We Bear Witness podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is a pleasure to have you tonight. I have a very special guest with me. I taught him everything he knows. He's looked up to me for a long time. He's actually here by request, his request. He's wanted so badly to be a part of it. He said, older brother is what he calls me. He says, older brother, I've listened to this podcast so many times, and I listen to it late at night, and I mold all my sermons after your takes, and I just really would like to be on it for once because I have a lot to share with the world.
Do you know what bear witness means? Do you know
with no further ado, this is my little brother, Cody Page. He pastors on the opposite side of the county as than my church. So if anyone knows where Nassau County is, he's in Callahan, and we're in Ferndale Beach, Amelia Island area. And Noak, you've been out there for, I don't know,
7 years in July.
7 years. That's really cool. 7 years. And he's doing a great job over there. It's a really awesome body of believers there at Greg Abel's. But we are excited to kind of present some new topics for the podcast. For those of you who've been listening for some time, and we greatly appreciate that. And it's really cool every month just to see more and more of you reach out and let us know that you're listening, let us know that you're learning something about the Bible, and also giving us some really great ideas for some topics to discuss that we don't feel have been exhausted yet, because everyone has a podcast and there's a lot of topics that are exhausted. But one thing that Cody and I have always really loved to discuss, almost too leisurely, is our love of film and the cinema. And so tonight, what we have for you is we have a look at a film that we've seen, and then we're going to kind of have some fun with that film, and then we're going to move right into how we believe that as we are Christ followers, wanting to see the truth in things, wanting to see how we can move and mold those conversations from general interest to public professions of faith in Christ, how Jesus is truth, and you'll find truth in art specifically, and storytelling, as Jesus was a very famous storyteller. We find that that'll be a really easy transition, and we'll learn a lot from both the movie at hand as well, more importantly, the scriptures and sort of bigger life questions of where we are. So I'm excited for that. Where did you feel like this love for film started with us? I feel like we could probably trace it back pretty far.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add on to what you're saying, I think, films and art and artistic expression give you an opportunity, really your first opportunity to develop an apologetic against a particular worldview. Right. To kind of be able to defend your faith, because every movie has a message, has something that they want you to gain from that movie, even if it's nihilistic or, agnostic sort of based. And so and I think always having, I want us to be mindful of the things that we're watching in such a degree that we're able to honor Christ with our viewing, and particularly allowing our children to view and encouraging the view. I think to answer your second question, I mean, love for film had to come from probably couple of different influences. I think it was from having parents that are so incredibly different, that we were both simultaneously raised on like Oklahoma, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, like these old timey musicals.
Yeah.
That we got, Fiddler on the Roof, that we got from my dad. No, I'm just kidding. I got from mom. And then like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, James Bond, Steven Seagal movies that we got from our dad. And so we were able to kind of be introduced from a very young age, whether always wisely or not.
I was going to say, there's a lot of comedies that you left out there to not
particularly comedies too. I think that's probably why comedy is our favorite genre, because both of our parents pretty much come together on the comedy. They both love to laugh. They both have incredible sense of humor, and have really encouraged that in us and our banter. And so I would say I connected that to a generation too. Like, I feel like that's the millennial generation was kind of, for lack of a better, probably not the best thing in the world, but they were kind of raised on TV and movies more than any other generation before, because the access was way different than it was before.
Yeah, I completely agree, Noak. And where we're headed today is a film that's, I think, still out in theaters. It's the newest addition to the Miles Morales story of Spider-Man. Across the Spider-Verse is the latest one. The first one that came out was Into the Spider-Verse. And for those who don't know or haven't seen this movie, real quick, we'll try our best not to have any spoilers, but Across the Spider-Verse pulls off a dazzling bit of editing during its pulse-pounding climax. But I will not mention that yet. We'll save that part. But right now, this whole adventure with Gwen Stacy, who's Spider-Woman, takes place across the multiverse. And you'll see a lot of Spider people and Spider Society in the middle portion of this trilogy. And it has just been, in our opinion, a fantastic film. We could probably talk a long time about why we like this film particularly. And if you're thinking, I'm not really into animation, there's a lot of people our age who are kind of like, I'm just not into animation, or I much more prefer the real thing. I totally understand that. But there's something about the storyline here that draws me in. And we have young kids, so we're constantly watching animation. And I mean, I'll cry like Onward and in Zootopia and stuff now. And I probably wouldn't have gone right after that before kids. But this type of animation is totally different. The storytelling is really what we're after. So Across the Spider-Verse, Cody, why did you like that film?
First off, did you say you just cried at Zootopia?
There's a couple parts that are pretty emotional. It's about identity. Don't worry about it. Anyway, move on. What did you like from Across the Spider-Verse?
The one time, no, there are two moments there's appropriate to cry in Pixar films, and it's the end of Toy Story 3 and the first 10 minutes of Up. Other than that,
if you're not crying in the first 10 minutes of Up, something's.
Yeah. So back to the point, Into the Spider-Verse was just, it's incredible. And particularly, that I'm a comic book nerd. And I was a comic book nerd before it was cool to be a comic book nerd. And so and Spider-Man, hands down, is the greatest comic book character, in my opinion, in the history of comic books. He is he's perfectly written. And I think that the style of these movies are both for fans of animation, fans of good stories, but particularly they're a love letter to comic book fans. Like the way that the animation comes to life brings a reality to it. Is as if you are, when you're reading a comic book and you're putting in your head what you are looking at, because you're just looking at pictures that you are almost imagining what the action is there. That's what you see on the screen when it comes to Into the Spider-Verse. It is just so incredible the way they mix sort of some old-fashioned animation with some, obviously, the CGI and new level animation. It's beautiful. The story, the pacing is perfect. They know when to go breakneck with the action as really quick edits, and then they know when to draw back with the conversations with Miles and his parents, particularly. And I would say the tone just captures not only Spider-Man in general as a comic, but Miles Morales' story. The tone is just there, and those things are just, to me, they're some of the most important things in movies. When an editing is off when it comes to pacing, and when a tone is just jarring, and you skip from one tone to another, those are two things that'll just take me completely out of movies. But this, I think, is a masterclass of those particular elements.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No,
I was going to say it's 2 hours and 19 minutes, which is so long for an animated film. In fact, I was looking at that as we were going to the movies and thinking, I'm taking my 5-year-old and 2-year-old to this thing. That's a nightmare. It was too long for a 2-year-old, although, she was in it for the most time. My 7 and 5-year-old were locked in the entire time. Like they didn't move, and they were in heaven. They loved it.
Well, and that leads to another point, is that this movie they're relatively clean. I mean, I think people will try to make a political agenda out of anything they see off the animation, but there's a huge difference in what's being made today. There's a huge difference in it being sort of shoved down our throats, and then it kind of just having its own artistic freedom, and that you might pick up on it or you might not, but it's left open to your interpretation. To me, that's way different. But the storytelling is wonderful, and I think parts of the movie that I found the most appealing. If you're not into spoilers, now's where you'll want to pause and skip for a couple minutes. But when that climax, that plot climax of him inside that Spider-Verse world, and the fascination of the multiverse, which is something we'll talk about in just a second. If you're watching any movies these days, they're playing a lot with time travel, with string theory. Gone are the days of Back to the Future. This is sort of different Earths all happening at the same time. And those Earths all have their possibilities that could lead to different conclusions. And so it would almost, if I have one criticism towards it, it was almost like so much to take in because of just how much is happening. It can almost be like it's definitely not a relaxing hammock kind of movie. I mean, you are very entertained and very engaged, but there's a lot that's occurring. Well, so when he's done with that Spider-Verse and he comes back, and then you see, and I'm afraid I don't even want to give that away yet because I know there's people that might not have watched it, but there's this change in his identity. The circumstances are not what he thought they were when he comes back home. Kind of like an altering. It reminds me of the part in Back to the Future, but it was for the good at the end of the original Back to the Future, the first one made in 1985, where he comes back and his dad had stood up to Biff in the prom parking lot. And now his family has like confidence and he's writing sci-fi bestsellers and they have the money for the truck. And so it's like he comes back and it's not dark. It's dark in the way Back to the Future 2 was.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's more like 2.
When old Biff left, got the almanac and went back
Billy
and saw
Zane.
1950s Biff. And so that to me was probably what I thought of right when that plot happened. I won't tell you why it's a bad new reality, but for those who are loyal to the comic books, how do you think this thing fares? The way it's even presented looks like the pages of a comic book. And I feel like that's really who they're trying to entertain, are people who've been following the Miles Morales Spider-Man timeline over.
Well, I think to your point, like the amount of stuff that's happening to me was the biggest thing that made me want to go back and rewatch it. Like that's the rewatchability factor. There are times where you kind of want to pause the movie and look for certain particular things, which is what, look, there are like, particularly with the Spider-Verse comic books, there are so many things happening on that particular series that you do take time. And that's the beauty of comic books, right? Is it's the art appreciation of it all. You do take time to look at every particular page and thing. You don't have time to do that in the movie, partly because of the pacing, but I think it adds to the rewatchability fact. It's already rewatchable just because the story has relevancy and the characters are so incredibly well written for animated characters. You relate to them, and we'll get into some of that why in the multiverse, I think, a little bit later. But adding to that, I think that the times where I was just like, there's so much happening on screen. Where do I look? It kind of fueled me to want to rewatch it again.
Yeah. So one thing we also really like to do is make lists. You and I have gotten into some knockdown, drag out arguments over the dinner table over these lists that the rest of the world might find absurd, but there might be a few listeners who care to weigh in. And if we do create this list, or we will create this list, if you do want to provide any feedback on your lists, if you disagree with us, we'd love to hear from you. If you agree with us, that's fine too. But right now, we'd love to rank the 10 Spider-Man movies from best to worst. This includes the 2 animated movies, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse.
We're doing worst to best, though, right?
That's the right order. And then we're doing the Tobey Maguire movies, and we're doing the Andrew Garfield movies, and we're doing the Tom Holland movies for all the Gen Zers who don't really even know a world of those others outside of No Way Home.
Well, and separate from his appearances in Avengers movies. These are
so for instance, one of my favorite scenes with Spider-Man is when we meet him, when Iron Man gives him the new suit in Civil War, but we're not counting that. So those aren't Spider-Man movies. That was a Spider-Man scene. So these are the Spider-Man build around movies. And so you want to kick us off, man? I'll do mine last, since you probably put way more effort into yours and mine was incredibly hard and I didn't like doing it.
So are we doing like one at a time, like back to forth, or
just rock them out. Worst to best. Go ahead.
Worst to best. Number 2.
I'll go back and like argue with you after
you're going to change. I'm going to get some flack for this.
I won't change mine. So that's fair.
Okay. Number 10 for me, the worst Spider-Man movie is Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's campy. Even the CGI, like Electro, just looks bad.
So I had that too, just to put it out there. We have the same number 10.
Yeah. This is why I want to do it back and forth, because I feel like
but it's going to go wrong immediately.
It is going to go at some point. I think they wasted an opportunity to cast Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin. Chris Cooper's a fabulous actor. He's tremendous. And then he's in like 2 scenes as he passes on the legacy to Harry. All of that just seemed really rushed. Again, pacing was off. Tone was off. The Gwen Stacy, it did impact. It was very impactful, Gwen Stacy's death, obviously, but then the last 15 minutes of the movie were an absolute joke. Rhino seemed like he came straight from a Disney Junior Spidey and His Amazing Friends. Like the guy was just impersonating Paul Giamatti, who's another fantastic actor. Like, what the heck are you doing? It's so bad. So that's number 10 for me. Number 9 for me is Spider-Man 3. Is that what you had for yours? Yeah.
I don't think I had it that low.
Yeah. Spider-Man 3 was a travesty because the
I did. I had it at 9. So we're tracking so far.
Spider-Man 3 was a travesty because they ruined the character of Peter Parker, which is tough to do. Look, Peter Parker's all about the tragedy. He's all about the baggage that he brings forth to this. Like, he's the one superhero that starts off as an orphan already, like, into the story. And then he has loss on top of that. And so, but then to make him just a little bit of a whiny baby for most of the movie.
I don't remember a bigger movie ever, because Sam Raimi had really brought the first two. I remember all of our friends were going to see that movie about 15 times. Yeah. And I think it's one of those that they just kept going back hoping that it would be better. Like people did with Batman versus Superman. They were just praying that like there'd be something in there they could like. And it just got worse every time. It's almost unwatchable. Yeah, they rushed so many characters. I mean, like the Venom story arc was so. I mean, Venom was a much later villain in the Spider-Man universe. Well, and I love Topher Grace. I love Topher Grace. I
didn't like the casting,
but terrible casting on Venom there. I mean,
the mask being pulled back with the fangs. Who was in charge of that?
With Tom Hardy, it got way better. But
Tom Hardy's a better. But
Bryce Dallas Howard, I thought was a really good Gwen Stacy. I didn't mind
for the
her
cast.
For that,
yeah, but then she's associated with one of the campiest most
swing dancing scene.
Yeah, like, was Swing cool? Even then in 2008 when it came out, was Swing cool?
Swing is still cool. All right, we gotta move. Because you're gonna be like 45 minutes.
I know. I'm sorry. Okay, so
I'm eager on this one. Number 8.
Number 8 for me is Amazing Spider-Man 1. I love Andrew Garfield as an actor. This is gonna sound weird. He's too GQ looking to actually pull off a Peter Parker.
What'd you put for 7?
7, and this is hard. This was tough because this is how good these movies are. 7's the original Spider-Man for me.
Oh my god,
the OG Spider-Man. And
we're way off now. It's
okay. I love it. It does hold up very well. I just need to give one pitch though. So the story is Sam Raimi, who directed the first 3 films, is a huge superhero fan. He wanted so desperately to direct a superhero movie, but he couldn't. So he made his own, and it's a film that's called Darkman. And it is the campiest, most Sam Raimi superhero film that you will ever see. Liam Neeson plays the title. Frances McDormand's the love interest. And it is so cheesy, but it's so good. So if you haven't seen Darkman, I believe it's rated R for some violence and possibly some language, but it's got like this Dick Tracy sort of like old timey. Yeah. It's so good. Watch Darkman. So number 7 for me is original Spider-Man. And I love that movie. I really do. I just think, that it's a testament to how good all these other films are.
So I put, on 8, I put Far From Home.
Which I know.
And then I put Amazing Spider-Man 1. I'm Amazing Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Far From Home, and Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Okay.
And then so I'll let you go on.
Yeah. So six was Far From Home for me. I just gave it the edge.
We're kind of a little all around the place there.
Yeah, I gave it the edge. I know a lot of people have a problem with the fact being it, but the Tony Stark movie in the realm of Peter Parker. This is one of the reasons I really like Homecoming and Far From Home is because when you read comic books, Spider-Man does always go places, and everywhere he goes, there's nothing more comic book than you open the page and him going somewhere completely random, and then Spider-Man having to
happens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so he's always
that's
finding
unrealistic,
trouble.
And it's like, guys,
but it's so comic book. Like it's so comic book, and I love the idea of bringing him over to Europe. And I thought, look, I'm a huge Jake Gyllenhaal fan. I think he's great. I know that he's probably doesn't have maybe the best range, but I just think he's solid in everything that he does. And I thought he pulled off the Mysterio character really great. I liked how that was written. I thought it was cool. Well, and the ending, the ending's the best part. I mean, the ending's fantastic. The last 5 minutes just leave you on that cliffhanger with J. Jonah Jameson. It's just,
that was probably the best part of the movie is when his identity is revealed and you have to wait 3 years for No Way Home.
Right.
So I put Spider-Man original Tobey Maguire at number 6.
Okay.
So we're not too far. We've jumbled up our movies a little bit, but pretty much tracking. So the top 5 are all the same, but we probably don't have the exact same.
No, I don't think we do. Number 5 for me is Homecoming.
Well, I take that back. So far, we are on the same page again. So maybe this makes sense. It's
perfect.
We shouldn't be surprised by this.
Man,
so
I want to get that movie.
Homecoming.
want to give that movie
Michael
all the
Keaton.
props.
What do you think
good.
about Michael Keaton?
So
in,
good
in that movie.
So good. Vulture's a huge Spider-Man villain. And I love the way they wrote it into the universe. I think that's it. Some people think that's the easier way to write it. I think it's more difficult to write it with continuity with what's happening in the Avengers universe. And the ability they had to pull that off was just remarkable. And he just killed it. I loved the twist to him being Liz Allen's dad. Nobody saw that coming. I think that was great.
Tapping in your inner comic book nerd, is Liz Allen one of the many love interests of Peter Parker?
So Liz Allen is actually the first love interest of Peter Parker in high school. Betty Bryant. Is it Brant or Bryant? What am I thinking right now?
Someone who wants to log in and correct him, please do.
Yeah, actually, Betty marries Ned Loomis, who's played by who's Peter's friend in the Homecoming series, but he's actually
the audience is currently shrinking in terms of their level of care.
Oh, sorry.
They went from here to like now. There's going to be one dude who's sticking around going, "This is the best podcast that We Bear Witness has ever recorded."
Sorry, I forgot what this was for a second. All right.
I thought we were just talking.
You
like
asked me,
do.
Liz Allen, but Liz Allen's into Flash Thompson in the high school. She plays the Mary Jane of the first. Mary Jane is actually Aunt May's neighbor's granddaughter in the original series. I'm so glad I'm married, because if I wasn't married and somebody heard this, then I'd be single forever. Like there's no chance.
You may not be after it airs.
That's right. I'm going to make sure Amy doesn't listen to this.
Number 4,
Spider-Man 2. That was really killer.
Me too.
Because,
I'm not even lying. Exact same thing.
But it solidifies that we are living in the age of the best Spider-Man films.
So that's the key part to that is we really look like probably we aren't, because we've always held down to like, back in my day takes, right. And all of these new things were just kind of like curmudgeons. We're just kind of like, it's okay, but it's no, Back to the Future. It's no Jurassic Park. Like you can have your Jurassic World, but Jurassic Park's the best dinosaur movie ever made.
Yeah.
And it is. Right. But the whole point is
Land Before Time 3. Thank you very much.
But when we get into Buttercream Gang 2, when we get into the Spider-Man universe, it's been opened up by the creators of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and then the Marvel universe and where it was headed. As well as the cameos, which we're skipping ahead, but has made No Way Home what No Way Home is. So there have just been some incredible $1.4 billion revenue storytelling of Spider-Man that if you've like tapped out on Spider-Man over the last 5 years, I mean, if you care about that character at all, now is the time to watch this.
Well, I think we're living in an age of superhero exhaustion. And they're still like, and to me, like, look, the last 3 Spider-Man films up until Avengers Endgame has been the only thing that, I mean, obviously the Maze Into the Spider-Verse doesn't count. That's purely Sony, which I love. But to me, Far From Home is the only thing I've seen since Endgame that's really worth watching. That has been so good. And I'll probably get a lot of slack from that because I know there's Marvel people that love that stuff. All the things that have happened since then with the television shows, they've just been all okay for me. Far From Home.
They'd be forgettable completely if they weren't on the heels of Tony Stark and Captain America.
Very true.
So that's kind of where it ended with Tony's snap for me. I'm welcoming a resurgence when I get into my 40s. They want to do some really cool casting and move it. I'm excited about James Gunn taking the DCEU, but that's a different podcast. But that leads us to the top 3 and why. Now these may be scattered. I'd be very shocked if we're on the same page here.
Yeah,
but who knows?
We didn't even get to really talk about Spider-Man 2.
We didn't. We have very limited time. I know. But
number 3,
number one favorite thing about Spider-Man 2 was
the train scene. It's just so Spider-Man, so good, well shot.
Where they like lift him up and take him.
Well, yeah, and just him making the I've got to go to the bathroom face the entire time he's holding things. Just classic.
What's wrong with you?
I'm just saying that's just a classic. Anyways,
we'll leave
I'm going to send you that one. Okay. You're implying now that we've had to take others out.
We've stopped many times.
Top three. Okay. Top 3. Far From Home is 3rd. It not only is it a great movie, if they just the fact that they pulled it off.
Wait. You've done something.
Sorry, not Far From
here.
Home. I'm sorry. No Way Home. Not Far From Home. No Way Home.
Okay, I was like,
the wrong
wait
thing.
a second.
I had a brain fart. No Way Home, just the fact that they pulled off the 3 Spider-Men there was a feat in itself. But the fact that they made a great movie out of it, just the Aunt May death, spoiler alert, was so incredibly impactful because, again, Spider-Man is marked by his loss. And for him to really have to not only lose Tony in this universe, but lose his parents and Uncle Ben off screen, but now lose Aunt May, and lose Mary Jane and Ned, it's just, you feel what Spider-Man's supposed to feel, like he is completely and totally alone.
Just get your 2-1.
All right, 2-1.
Actually, leave your 1. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can go 2-1.
Listen, 2-1 is across the Spider-Verse and then Into the Spider-Verse. 2 is Across the Spider-Verse, and I'm not so sure it's only number 2 because I've only seen it once. It's that good. Like it is that. In fact, I walked out of the theater saying, I've texted you this. For me, I think collectively. Now, I do think The Dark Knight is the best superhero movie that's ever been made. Agreed. But collectively, and I love Batman Begins too, but collectively, I think Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse are collectively better than Batman Begins and Dark Knight. I really do think that they are that good.
I want you alone in that. You know how I feel about Batman.
I can handle that.
We'll have to get Keith Foskey on here to just come yell at you.
I'm okay with that. I really do think that they are that good. There's just nothing wrong with them. And I could make some arguments for the things that are wrong. As much as I love Dark Knight, I think the third act is shoehorned and we waste a good. I would have liked to see Dark Knight pull Into the Spider-Verse and save the conclusion for Two-Face's arc for the very end. I know that had to do it.
You've consistently held on to that view since you saw it. You thought they rushed the villains, but my number 3 was Across, and then I gave No Way Home number 2, just because, like you said earlier today, I chose a bit more of the nostalgia. I was so comfortable in the theaters. And I mean, I don't think I looked away from the screen. I don't even know if I blinked. Like when those 3 were on the screen, I thought something wonderful is happening here.
Pure joy.
Where they managed to cross 25 years, 20 years worth of Spider-Man movies and our childhood and all that into one. They're all together. Andrew Garfield, I thought, was his best in those trios. He was so good, but all the No Way Home villains didn't feel like too much. It didn't feel like the Spider-Man 3 problem. Yeah. It felt like they were working in sync. And then you had Dr. Ock sort of do that big switch at the end. I think that was his rightful storyline because of his and Peter's relationship prior. Yeah. So I absolutely loved it. Willem Dafoe. I mean, if that wasn't a comic book movie, he would have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
That scene in the apartment is just
when he's turning
creepy.
bad and you don't know.
Good. So good, like chills in my spine. Yeah, it's very much.
That movie is rewatchable, and then Doctor Strange is sort of added as kind of like a great Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right.
Like he wasn't the main character because the Strange movies fall a little short to me.
Right.
But I think he's a great side character, awesome side character, like a babysitter of the Spider-Man and his gang. So I love that mentality. So I put that over. And Across the Spider-Verse, I agree with you. I think if I watch it again, I feel like it's a chance where I just end up giving those two the top 2 slots on art.
Right.
But Into the Spider-Verse wins the number 1 seed for both of us.
And I think
why Into the Spider-Verse? Why is that? It's not even Peter Parker. It's Miles Morales. Why Miles Morales?
I think going up against No Way Home, they're pretty much they're similar story, but the Into the Spider-Verse's story of the multiverse is better. It is like I get why. I just think the idea of not being able to go to college being so pivotal, for him. It's just like, bro, look, you just saved the world. Like you should be fine. You and Mary Jane and Ned will be. I know that nobody knows you're Peter Parker, but you'll be taken care of.
He lost his whole identity. It's heartbreaking.
And then he ends up losing his whole identity because his friends can't go to college. Like that,
they can't. No, there's no memory. There's no memory of him.
I know you got to set the wheels in motion to make it happen. I just thought that.
Why is Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, because I think
number 1.
Yeah, I think the story is better. I think they were able to encapsulate the heart of the multiverse according to the comics, which is more than just 3 separate Spider-Man who are living their lives, but who are the film noir Spider-Man played by Nick Cage and Spider-Ham played by John Mulaney. Like this idea is that's kind of the heart of the Spider-Verse, them coming together, and then I think the idea, for me, the star of the show is Peter B. Parker. Like the idea of Nick Miller playing a Peter Parker who's going through a midlife crisis and the comedic timing. And again, for me, tone and pacing. The movie doesn't waste anything in Into the Spider-Verse. There's no wasted shots. You look back and you go, well, what would I fix about Into the Spider-Verse? I don't have anything.
I don't have anything. It's a perfect film to me, and my kids love it. Number one, I think that it's been a big deal in our household. But two, who voiced Kingpin on that? It was
wasn't it Liev Schreiber?
Liev Schreiber had that deep Brooklyn, kind of voice. And then the climate or the middle, probably pre-act 2, is when Nick Miller, which is who he is, Peter B. Parker, takes Miles and they go to the facility, and she's like, "But my friends call me." Yeah. That whole thing unveils. And then he's still Spider-Man when she's beating him up and all of that. And he takes like the bagel. I just thought that,
it's really funny
when they're preparing for it in the bus, you hear St. Elmo's Fire, like the song. So it's just wonderful. But yay. And then Clay can put something real celebratory here. Yeah. Number one, no, it's fine. Number one, Into the Spider-Verse. So real quick, before we have about 4 or 5 more minutes. Yeah. I wanted to get into why we could talk, you and I could talk movies and comic book movies, especially for hours. But one thing I want everyone to kind of go home with is why we find that story of Spider-Man so special and what it can have to do with getting and segueing it to a conversation about the gospel. Tell everyone what you said about why you think there's a fascination with the multiverse, and that'll kind of help us lead into the human condition.
Well, I think one of our biggest struggles in life is, particularly in our past, thinking about past decisions and how our lives would have been different if we had changed those decisions, which is really, at its core, it's a lack of trust in the sovereignty of God, right? That he has in such a way, obviously using the means of our decisions, but worked out his will in our lives to such a degree where we rest in his predetermined plan, that we know he hasn't wasted any of our lives. He's gone before us in that to make us more into the image of Christ. And yet we still struggle with, because we face the consequences of some decisions in our past, dealing with what would our lives have been like? Just that question. I know in my life has been something that's been over and over again in my mind. What would our lives be? What would my life have been like if I had made this friend and not that friend my first year at Hilliard Middle Senior High School, right? Like if I had not made this particular decision to get in this relationship instead of this relationship, if I had taken this job and not that job, what would have changed? And in the multiverse, really what you see is that, right? You see how those little decisions could have possibly impacted, and yet, or it really just changed everything about everybody's life. And yet, I think it almost highlights a struggle for us, as we would want to know, but that's not something that we're ever guaranteed to know. Like, the first multiverse movie is It's a Wonderful Life. That is the introduction to the multiverse, and it's George Bailey seeing how much better he's made other people's lives because of his impact there. That's probably not the way it would really work for us. But on the
that's
flip
so
side
funny
of that,
to think about. Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life gave us this first sort of understanding, because even Christmas Carol didn't do that. Nothing changed. He had visions and then went back and he changed. He was the one that changed, not the setting. But everything changed when George Bailey went back and he was a hero. That's interesting. Yeah. And I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah. And so I think I just know in my ministry has been a constant struggle with people who just fixate on things that happen in their life and not really able to grasp the consequences of their own actions. But I think the thing that's interesting about the multiverse, particularly in Across the Spider-Verse, is that there are some principles that always remain in play in every universe. And particularly some of those include suffering in order to be strengthened. And that's one of the things that I think that it can really be taken to understand the gospel and the way of the Christian life, is that God does not waste 1 ounce of our suffering in order to make us like his son, which is the ultimate goal of the gospel.
So let me give you the Nerdist.com's paraphrasing of the entire meaning of the Across the Spider-Verse, and then we'll utilize that to kind of tell everybody and remind everybody how they can get from this movie to what the Bible says is the human condition. Because I think that's really what it comes down to, is a matter of what's changing in you and what changes us. Yeah. And I think that's what we're kind of looking at, like plates spinning around us, are the worlds, the multiverses, the people, the setting, the clothing, the style, the buildings. But in reality, what's really changing? Well, the steady, the constant, your point of view. So the main idea of Across the Spider-Verse is the things that happen to us, no matter how painful they might be or how much we wish they didn't happen, shape who we are. But whether good or bad, the events of our lives don't define us. It's how we respond to them that defines us. Our choices define who we are.
Yeah.
Which is not wrong.
It's not wrong.
As far as I thought Nerdist always usually hits it out of the park of what the movie's about.
But
But why is that bad? Why is that bad theology? And why do we see that theology preached pulpit after pulpit in a moralistic, therapeutic way to put people at the center rather than Christ at the center? How does that change when it comes to the gospel?
I would say it's the same thing it's always been, is that the people of God, and particularly even Christians, they still struggle to understand how grace works. They don't, particularly sanctifying grace, right? Like they have the idea that once you are saved and you have obtained the grace of God, then you're done with grace. But the truth of the matter is that God's still saving you as you come to Christ, right? He is still removing sin in your life and replacing it with holiness. And that is something that you need grace for, that you actually have empowered grace to live. And so, yeah, your choices are the means by which some of these things particularly happen. And yet they would still happen apart from your choices, which should propel you to want to make choices that honor the Lord. Like that's the beauty about justification, right? Is that the fact that I know that I'm declared righteous by God in his sight, which makes me want to make better choices to him and not put everything, all this anxiety and pressure and worry on whether or not I make the right choice that's pleasing to God. No, I rest in the fact that through my sanctification, he's promised to make me more like his son. And so you have that idea of Paul in Philippians 2, right? Work out your salvation if you're trembling, yet knowing that God is at work in you, right? According to his will for his good pleasure. I jacked that verse up. I forgot what it was. But that's the dichotomy we live in on a day by day basis, is I know that I need to work out my salvation in fear and trembling. So my decisions do matter. And yet, even in those decisions, I'm able to rest in the finished decreed work of a good God who loves me.
Yeah. The interesting thing is on its own, like when I read that Nerdist paraphrasing of the movie, people can relate to that. And it doesn't sound bad. It's like, we do need to take responsibility for our actions, and the events of our life do shape us. But when they bring it down to what it's all about, whenever the world tries to go after the human condition, they will always get the human condition wrong. This goes as far back to Rousseau. Rousseau, the philosopher, once theorized that man is naturally good, but he's corrupted by society. So he's good inside, he's corrupted, and he has to move past those things with good choices. Even Joel Osteen's preached that most people are really
That's
good.
not the Rousseau brothers, right? That's
different, but nice tie-in. And then you have a movement in Aristotle's line of thinking, as well as John Locke's notion. Remember John Locke, the blank slate theory, that we are born empty slate, untouched, white piece of paper, that we are free to define the content of our character, and that really what happens is it's situational. The outside forces shape us. So that's really a bit more of what Across the Spider-Verse is. It's more Lockean. Right. But according to the Bible, the natural human condition is sinful and estranged from God. We're born in a perpetual state against God's design and God's plan because of the inheritance of our flesh from our father Adam. So this is what really brings those movies to life for the Christ follower, is that we watch them knowing we are not born innately good or morally neutral. We are born sinners, and every person's destiny is death and wrath because of it. But like you said, we were not left alone in that wrath. Right. If we know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, then God, through a love he has for people who were once his enemies, he calls his children to himself and demonstrates that great love for us by sending his only begotten son to die in our place. So that's the gospel, is that the healer found us. Right. Now, why that can still be appropriated to the Across the Spider-Verse Nerdist paraphrasing is once Jesus finds us, and once we've had the Holy Spirit transformation, like you said, once we've been justified by faith in Christ, apart from no works to save us, then they will now be a new creations who have fruit, and those choices that are made are fruit of that salvation. And so, yes, your consequences matter, but recognize that not only did God create you, he redeems you. And that's really what's shaping your hope. That's really where your joy and your rest in. So it's not just fatalism, where you hold all the cards. Right. And that's really what what these cartoon movies or what any kind of animation can kind of teach. I say cartoons because of where Disney's kind of gone with their animation too. Like you see Elemental or you see Frozen 2, and it's always you will your life, you follow your heart, you create your future. And you really, if your kids and your family are going to even enjoy these down to the details of which you and I enjoy these, we've got to go back and be sort of going through the catechisms and doctrinally explaining to them those differences.
And I do think, adding on to that, I think, there is there's almost it's like I always talk about, a half truth is always more dangerous than an out lie. And a lot of these movies, what they propose to you is that your circumstances don't define you. And I think Across the Spider-Verse does that very well, which is true. Your circumstances do not define you, but they would in place of that say your choices therefore define you, which is not true. Your creator and your relationship with your creator defines you. Right. And there's only two categories. The sinner that stands in the hands of God's wrath with every breath being an opportunity for you to repent and turn in grace to him, or a saint who's been declared righteous, though he's glory but garbage. The idea of who we are in mankind. So I think wrestling with that would therefore say for the Christian, your circumstances don't define you. What Christ says about you, who you once were, what he's done, and who you now are in him now define you, are the very purpose of your life, where the humanistic element comes into all these animated movies to say, no, your choices, your power, your healing, your will, you're the one that defines exactly who you are. And again, like hearing that my choices don't define me, can cause someone to go the complete opposite way and therefore say that my choices don't matter, which is not true. But my choices, as you said, show evidence of who I belong to, right? Show the evidence of my relationship with the Father.
Yep. Your choices show who you belong to and who is the owner of your heart, who has captivated you, who you seek to please, and whose desires you seek to live your life for. And so let's always draw it back to the Creator and the Redeemer, as Calvin would say. Brother, thank you so much for jumping on. I know that this is like one of the shortest conversations you and I would have about movies in general, but to people listening, it's probably not that short.
Yeah.
But but I'm so glad you came on. No, it's great. But everyone, thank you so much for listening. Remember that We Bear Witness podcast is available wherever podcasts are platformed. Please subscribe. We would love to have you as sort of part of our family here in the community, as well as the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe and tell your friends. We greatly appreciate all of your support. Hope you have a wonderful week. Brother, thank you so much for coming on. And do you have anything else to say to anybody? Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry that you had to mow your lawn today and miss getting a chance to meet your hero, Kamala Harris, in Jacksonville today. That's not what. No, that's what you said. You said I can't wait. I told you that my hero was Mark Paul Gosselaar, not Kamala Harris. I'm pretty sure you misunderstood. I'm pretty sure you had tickets and you had to sell them today. You had to do some things. Thanks, man. You're welcome. All right, everybody. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye. Bye.